It's time for AggroChat, the official podcast of the Tales of the Aggronaut blog and stalwart gaming community, where we talk about stuff and things, and the stuff about the things, and sometimes gaming. I'm Belghast, and let's start the show. Hey folks, it's that time again. Time for another episode of AggroChat. This is episode 464. Tonight we're joined by Ammo.
Hello.
Ashgar.
Hi.
Grace.
Hello.
Kodra.
There's nothing in the rules that say a dog can't be a speedrunner.
Tam.
Hello.
And Thalen.
Hey there.
So tonight we are doing our traditional Games of the Year show, and as we learned last year, it makes more sense to split it in half. So I guess some quick guidelines for anyone who's not listened to one of these shows. These are the games of the year for us, and it doesn't necessarily mean they were released this year. A lot of them were, but that's not a requirement. Like it was a game that was significant for us during that year, and essentially we have 3 picks apiece, and then a number of honorable mentions, and from that list, we pull together the lineup for the 2 shows. And this year was a year with very little overlap.
Turns out there were a lot of really good games that actually did come out this year. Like, an overwhelming number of our list this year compared to usual is actually from this year.
Yeah.
Right?
But as a result of that wonderful flood of choices, there wasn't a ton of overlap.
So it's a really long list.
Yeah, we have 2 very packed shows. So some of these we may buzz through because they're kind of lumped together in groupings. Like this first pair are related. So Risk of Rain Returns and Risk of Rain 2.
Yeah, Risk of Rain Returns was one of my picks for this year. Like, for real. It came out this year. It is a remake of one of my favorite games of all time. It is a very excellent remake. It looks like Risk of... When we talked about Evoland, we talked about how Evoland looks like how you remember games of that era looking.
Mm-hmm.
This looks like how you remember Risk of Rain looking. In reality, they basically doubled the resolution of absolutely everything and redrew pretty much everything. So, like, it's an amazing version of the game. And if you never played the original Risk of Rain, you should give this a shot.
Nice.
However, as a result of seeing this and actually getting to play it, I also took out with some other people here Risk of Rain 2, which I've owned since it came out, since before it came out, but never actually completed.
It is a radically different game.
It's a very, very different game.
It's very good, though. It's still like, it's got the same vibe to the structure of the game. And playing it multiplayer is a real blast and a real joy.
Yeah, it's a really, really cool... It's really cool to see the same game re-envisioned so successfully, because it really feels like a re-envisioning of Risk of Rain, but despite it being like a radically different game style, it's got all the same vibe.
So yeah, I thought that deserved a mention for this year. It's a good game.
I would also say that one of my challenges with the original Risk of Rain is it felt like sometimes your character build was just like, it didn't get there, and like no amount of playing was going to help you get there. This game, the fact that it is 3D allows you to take completely different tactics that I feel really makes it feel a little bit more fair and reasonable. And frankly, we haven't played on the harder difficulties, but also a little bit easier. And I found, at least in single player, the original Risk of Rain extremely difficult.
I mean, yeah, that was my
It kind of
experience.
is, yes.
Yeah, that was my experience as well.
And in a way that I don't find Risk of Rain 2 that difficult.
Yeah, I definitely feel like I should try both of these at some point when, I don't have 50 other games.
This was a packed year.
Attention.
I definitely felt like Risk of Rain 2 was targeting a different audience than the first one without totally alienating its original audience, and that's super hard to do, and I'm impressed that they managed it. And I agree that it's more forgiving.
Next game on the list is Celeste Strawberry Jam, something Kodra has been playing a lot of last year.
Yeah, so this is a mod from the Celeste mod community, that came out, I want to say in February of this year. And it's kind of spiritually a follow-on to the spring collab from 2020, which was previously like the biggest collaborative effort. And it had like 80 different developers working on it. They had 5 different levels of difficulty, from beginner, quote unquote beginner, to the Grandmaster lobby. And Strawberry Jam follows that in a bunch of ways, but like this game also is got 2 additional years worth of the collective community figuring out like what is fun, what you can do, like how we can work, and it's truly got some really impressive levels to it. A lot of the detail is really good. Like the soundtrack is incredible, and it's all original music made by a team. Like they had, I think, over 300 people working on this, like, which is an organizational challenge that I really respect. And so big shout outs to the people who were the captains for the various places in here. But the thing that like I've been thinking about coming up to this show is just how games and the actual text of a game can help form the community around the game. And I think one of the things that Celeste as a game, I don't know if intentionally or what, did is really foster a collaborative community around its game. And this is what like leads to these big, massive projects where people, like hundreds of people, are working together to build this thing. It's where like it doesn't matter if you're just starting on the journey or whatever, people are going to be supportive of you trying to get through this because, hey, we were all there at the start, and like it's a journey. Like the journey is what's important, and that's the message of Celeste, and that's kind of like the ethos of the community. And I'm dealing with other games that have much less impressive communities, and like, yeah, it turns out like community management is a skill, and like there's ways that like just the core text of a game can help format that, and that's really what's been impressive. If you're interested in this, the beginner lobby generally starts out in difficulty. Every single lobby has 3 levels of difficulty within that lobby, which starts from like green, yellow to red. If you've gotten through like the first 3 chapters, you should be able to possibly start on the greens, and then the first lobby goes up to like the very first and the first and second B-sides in difficulty. So if you've been that far, you should be able to do the beginner lobby. And if you do, I highly recommend checking out Paint, which is an absolutely beautifully developed, like artistic, interesting level that is basically making the best possible version of a rhythm level. The song is my absolute favorite from the collab, and it doesn't sound like something that you could put into a rhythm level because it's much more musically complex. It's actually funny because the sound engineer for Celeste, Kevin Regami, was on the couch for the speedrun of it and was commenting about how he was just kind of shocked when he realized that it was actually a rhythm level using the Fmod technology he developed, and is like, this was technology we thought was jank. How did you make something so beautiful with it? And it really is. But I'm currently up to the expert lobby myself. I'm at the very end of the yellow, the mid-tier difficulties. I think I've got like 4 or 5 more. This is probably where I'm going to close it out for at least a point. I don't think I'm gonna to push into the reds or get into Grandmaster, but like maybe I'll come back and revisit it after I do a bunch of other mods. There's just a lot of Celeste still happening, and it's really fun to play. And like once you do get to those higher tiers of difficulty, the game rewards you with like suddenly your character is moving in what feels like superhuman ways, and the inputs you are doing feel superhuman, and you just feel awesome if you're able to stick it out. And it is a course thing. It is going to be challenging, but like we're all going to encourage you along your path because that's sort of the community that gets fostered. Anyways, highly recommend. Really fun. And if you need help getting it installed, reach out and I will, Kodra22, I will help you get your way started in this. It's really good.
One day I will pick up Celeste again. I got as far as finishing B-sides and was like, all right, I think I've done enough. But there's definitely a lot more there.
The Celeste movement engine is very, it's got a lot going on with it.
So this next game made a bit of a splash for several of us, and I think this year is going to be an even bigger splash in the larger gaming community. But Last Epoch, it's almost released.
Yeah, this one was mine. And I waffled about putting it on the list because it's not technically released yet. It is going to be released on February 21st, I believe. I cannot wait. It might end up on my Games of the Year list again for 2024. We'll see. But Last Epoch, for me, came a little bit out of nowhere, but made a huge splash and is, for me, the spiritual successor of Diablo 3 that I really needed, even though it is different from Diablo 3 in a lot of ways, but yeah, the way that the builds work in this game, the way that the combat flows in this game, it's just, for me, it gives me the same chill vibes that I get from playing Greater Rifts, and I cannot say enough good things about it. I absolutely love the way that the classes and the skills work, how customizable everything is. I am super excited about the new factions that are going to be coming out when the game officially launches. But I spent a really goodly number of hours playing Last Epoch in 2023. And every time the game got updated, it just kept getting better and better. I started playing it before group play was fully implemented, and it was really kind of joyful to see how much attention the game got when that went live. And yeah, I just, it has a much more sane crafting system than some other games that we'll be talking about later. It just hits all my buttons. I murder things and loot comes out and it brings me joy.
Yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to picking this up. I played it a little bit, and it was before I really got into Path of Exile, and so I was still not really sure what I was doing, and now I feel like I understand ARPGs a little bit better and how to do builds. I feel like this is a lot more intuitive of a game, a lot simpler than like Path of Exile. I sat down with Ash and was like, I want to do X, and then I built that thing with a little bit of help, and then we found that there was actually a guide written for it, and we were like within like in the margin of error of what they would ask you to do.
I think of it as it's definitely more intuitive. I don't actually think it's simpler. I just think that it guides you to success and wants you to be successful in a way that other games don't necessarily.
It does not feel actively hostile to me as a player the way that Path of Exile can sometimes.
Yeah.
And as much as I also love Path of Exile, sometimes I just want someone to explain to me what I need to do to upgrade a weapon. When the first time that I'm playing a game, I would like to be able to look at the skill tree and have some chance of figuring out something that might work for me without having to do many deep dives elsewhere on the internet.
Well, and one thing that I think is important, I think even Path of Exile, like you hear the devs, they talk about how this is a failure of their game is. I'm looking forward to being able to pick up loot that is like equipable gear and like care about the loot that drops on the ground and not be like, well, that was a whole bunch of garbage that's cluttering up my screen.
Yeah. The loot does feel more meaningful. I think it's going to be even more fun once those factions go in and you can adjust the drops that you get or adjust things so that you can, trade for gear that you really want. But yeah, I really just like that I can say, okay, I really like this archetype of, a character class, and make sense of a build, and run with it and understand how to tweak it. I mean, yes, eventually you get to that point with Path of Exile, but again, it took a matter of days to weeks to figure some of this out, as opposed to months to years. And that is definitely more my speed. It's also just beautiful. I really do just love running around the world. It has an ARPG story.
Like, it's not a bad story. It's pretty good, and it's probably going to get better as they continue to work on it. But like, it is an ARPG story.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you're right. It's pretty decent for an ARPG story, but it's an ARPG story. But that's okay.
I appreciate. So it wins big points with me. First, on the environments, where I don't feel like I'm going from bleak zone to bleak zone forever, or like, hey, here's a pretty place, but now it's on fire. Everything's terrible. Like some of the places are like actually gorgeous to wander through. And also, like, I didn't play much of it this year because for like probably 7-8 months, the controller support wasn't working, and so I couldn't play it. And I fully expected, because I've seen this before, because I've seen this before in early access games, that was just going to be the end of Last Epoch for me. Because when I've seen a feature like that dropped and not like immediately restored, it's like, nope, that's just not going to be in the final game. Like, and I kind of put it down once I couldn't use a controller anymore. But they brought controller support back, and it works better than it did before. And that's a huge win in my book. Like, I realize it's a low bar, but from the standpoint of somebody who can't actually play these games without controller support, like, it's a huge difference.
Yeah, it's a huge deal. And I think overall, it seems like this team has been pretty transparent with things. And again, the regularity of updates while they're still in early access has been pretty wonderful as far as I'm concerned. So yeah, looking forward to putting this back on the list for 2024.
I'm really excited for when they have a little bit more visual customization for your characters. And it was funny because I was like, ooh, what MTX could I get? Because I've started to get into that stuff. And the only thing I could find on Google was an apology letter for their MTX.
Yeah, I mean, I gotta be honest, like, the character models are not good, but hopefully at some point they will be good.
I mean, I am currently in the Wild Druid camp in that my character model is not the thing I see most of the time.
Yeah.
For my primary character. But yeah.
I mean, they've not ruled out...
Good game. We should play it.
Yeah, they've not ruled out customizable characters. It's just further down the roadmap. So related to Last Epoch is probably the exact opposite of approachability, which is Path of Exile. And this year was really the year that Path of Exile kind of 100% wormed its way into my psyche and became the game I played most of all So like it was a key thing to me, so I put it on the list as one of my main picks. We had a lot of good leagues this year. Even like Crucible was probably the least remarkable of the leagues, and it was still kind of interesting. And it was, you know, an era during the game when there was like a lot of really interesting builds. But yeah, like I love Path of Exile. Like I'm a Path of Exile junkie now, but it took me like a year and some change to get there.
I was about to say, it took me, I think I failed 2 leagues completely. And then on my 3rd league, which was the last one, I finally got into it.
Yeah. I mean, which is a similar story to me. Cause like it took me Sentinel in Calandra and half of Sanctum to really reach a point where I felt comfortable with the game. And then from Sanctum to Crucible to Ancestor and now Affliction, I have been up and running with each of them.
So yeah, there's a thread, a post where somebody was like asking why Path of Exile seemed to be consuming Diablo's lunch. Like why was it seemingly so much more successful than D4? And there was a response that stuck with me, and it's what I put in my mindset when I got back into it, which is like Diablo is kind of like Hearthstone, and Path of Exile is kind of like Magic, and that feels very true in a bunch of different ways. In that Path of Exile is incredibly broad, incredibly deep, and incredibly impenetrable, especially when you're starting off, and it's probably better just to like read someone else's guide on how to play this game.
Yeah.
Which your mileage may vary on that, but I play Magic, and that's how I have played Magic in the past, and so I was able to like, okay, let's sit down and find a build and follow a guide and be like, how do I follow a guide? And then for a while there, guides were not well written, and I was fortunate to be able to find a guide that was like a little bit more professionally put together, and that ultimately helped me get there. It's still like one of those things where like there are things that people just assume you understand about Path of Exile when you're writing a guide, and like one of them got put into as a footnote, and I was like, oh wait, why does it tell me that in like such a offhanded way? It's like, oh, this is something everyone should be doing. Like you should always be leveling up a bunch of spare copies of your primary spell if you want to corrupt it into a level 21 version. That's just obvious to people who've been playing Path of Exile for a while, but like it's not obvious to somebody who's starting out. And so I was really happy it was in the guide.
Yeah. I mean, that's why we throw, white socket items in the guild bank so people can do that easily. But again, like there's so many things that folks just assume, and like most of the people that write guides for the game have been so far removed from when they started. It's like this is a 10-year-old game at this point.
I'm really looking forward to Path of Exile too. I hope they manage to reduce the difference in player power from 100,000 to 10,000.
Yeah, I mean, because that's kind of the challenge is like there's a level of player that is, oh, I fumbled my way through the campaign and I called that good. And then there's like a level of player that, oh, I successfully completed some maps and that's good. Then there's like, oh, I finished all the maps, but I can't do bosses. And then there's, I could do bosses, but I can't quite do uber bosses yet. And then there's, I can just raffle stomp the entire game. And there's so much gap between each one of those.
It seems like they at least recognize that it's a problem.
Yeah.
And it is a problem. And they should probably make it they should make the difference between a top tier player and a mid tier player not like in the millions of times of effectiveness.
Yeah.
But the thing is like,
anyway,
it's
back to games of the year.
Yeah, it's going to be a great year for ARPGs. There's so many that are, on the horizon and are ascending. So,
yeah.
System Shock, the Night Dive re-release.
Yes. I loved this so much. This is one of those. Is like it's technically a game from this year. It came out this year. It's a remake of a game from the '90s, and such a
But it's like a perfect way to
perfect
remake it.
remake. Yeah, no,
I mean, it's a lot like I was saying for Risk of Rain Returns, right? Like,
yeah,
it looks like how you remember it looking.
yeah, and it plays like how I remember those games playing, and like this is one of the games that I played to completion this year, and it was a lot of fun, and it was very much a '90s game. Like there were things that you don't really see much in FPSs anymore, and I just and it even had that thing that every '90s FPS had, where you get to a point in the game towards the end of it, and you realize that this is the point where they ran out of time and money. I swear, every FPS in the '90s, it happened. It happened in Half-Life. It happened here. It happened in Tron 2.0. Every single game.
Oh, there's so many.
But even that, like, it's just it happened with all of them. So it's part of the experience. But yeah, no, I loved it, and I am looking forward to more from Night Dive. They're working on Dark Forces now,
I'm
and
so
I love
ready
Dark
for it.
Forces so much. I can't wait, because that is a game that, again, that is a game that is so old at this point that it's not really viable to try and play the original on a modern machine. Like but like put modern graphics and sound on that, and spiff up the mechanics just a little bit, and yeah, and everybody can. All these kids today that have been watching their Mandalorians can learn where the Dark Troopers originally came from.
Yup. And why we freaked out when they started showing up on that show.
Uh-huh. But yeah, and like looking forward to that, and just the notion that like maybe these things being, it seems like, reasonably successful will maybe make more companies realize that yes, in fact, there is a market for doing the work to bring those games back up to snuff and making them available again. One can hope.
Could we get a Deus Ex game that looks like I remember it?
I sure hope so. I mean, maybe that'll be the next thing Night Dive will do.
Maybe, but yeah, that's super exciting. And I need to play System Shock. I've never played it, and I hear it's very good.
This is
I
the way to play
quite a
it.
bit of this release this year. I just didn't make it all the way through, and it was really good, like super good.
And then after you've played this, then you go play System Shock 2, and yeah, because really System Shock 2 is the one, like that's where people remember Shodan from, really.
Yeah, it's like Terminator versus Terminator 2.
Yeah.
Xenoblade Chronicles 3 Future Redeemed.
This is one of my picks. I'm cheating a little bit because it is technically the DLC to Xenoblade 3, but it's a complete story with a bunch of new content, and I enjoyed the heck out of it. It is similar to the Torna DLC from 2, where it's has basically a sort of new old cast, and it adds on to the lore of the game that it came from. But it provides a really fantastic wrap-up to the Xenoblade trilogy. I was very satisfied with it. It's a very thoughtful and satisfying conclusion, but it left some mysteries and hints of possibilities for the Xeno series to come, which I'm very excited about. The new cast is fun. They bring back some characters from the first 2 games. It's not really spoilery, but they are very, very fun in this game. I really enjoyed how they brought them in and how they interact with the other characters. There's some very big nostalgia trips, especially for Xenoblade 1. One area is just like, oh wow, when you get to it, it's just really, really cool. It was such a trip. But the story was fun. Again, similar to Torna, they kind of tune up the combat a little bit since the character lineup is a little bit different. So they kind of speed things up and clean things up and make chain attacks a little more, I don't want to say interesting, but you can use different tactics, so that was really fun. The music was really great. The ending theme was performed by Joanne Hogg, who did the ending theme for Xenosaga, and also some songs from the ending theme from Xenogears and some songs from Xenosaga. So, I should probably point out that in the back half of the game, there is definitely some stuff that happens that makes you think, wait, this is going a little further back in the Xeno series than just Xenoblade 1. So I don't want to go too much into that because it is just kind of like one of the big things that people were sharing on the internet was an image of a radio that a character was listening to, and there's a logo for Vector Corporation on it, which is familiar to people who played Xenosaga. And yeah, and there's a big name drop on the radio program that they're listening to. So I don't know. I'm hoping those rumors of the Xenosaga remastered, might hopefully come true soon.
That would be nice.
It would be very
I'd
nice.
like to play those at some point, but I don't really want to play them on the PS2.
I would.
Same.
Yeah.
The things I would do for Xenogears remaster.
Oh yeah, that too.
I think Square at least remembers Xenogears exists.
Yeah. So
I'm not sure Namco remembers Xenosaga exists.
Well, I mean, they at least remember that Cosmos exists because
that's fair. He's in everything.
Yeah. So yeah, it's very interesting. I'm very curious to see where they're heading with this because the final shot of the DLC is again kind of familiar if you've played Xenosaga. So it's, I don't know. I don't know what they're going to do, but it's probably going to be crazy and exciting, and I'm looking forward to that. And a port of Xenoblade X on Switch 2. Hopefully, maybe. I can dream, right?
I'm right there with you.
Yeah.
So yeah, I loved it. It was great. Very satisfying. It just ticked all the right boxes for me for a nostalgia trip and for finishing up this great trilogy of games that I love very much.
Hi-Fi Rush.
All right, this one got an honorable mention from me, mostly because I didn't actually play it in 2023, although it came out in 2023. I didn't actually start playing it until this month because I realized I'd entirely missed it.
What a game, though.
Yes. So there are a lot of games that have attempted to blend a rhythm game and action game to various degrees of success. Soundfall was pretty good. This feels like it is trying to do, like, what Soundfall tried to do, Hi-Fi Rush nailed, just completely. And one of the biggest reasons is, to get down into the weeds a little bit, all of your actions, regardless of when you press the buttons, take place on the beat of the song. So while they're more effective if you press the buttons on the beat, they're going to go off on the beat regardless. So like it never breaks up the sense of flow, like never breaks up the song, and it's just a joy.
It's also this also really, really helps if you're not used to the beat. The fact that everything happens on the beat pretty quickly helps you get used to it, I think.
And to be clear, everything happens on the beat. Enemy attacks, your attacks, enemy aiming, so on and so forth. Your jumps, takes some getting used to, admittedly, but it's really cool. So yeah, like, definitely deserves mention. Also is just kind of an interesting, like, an amazing game aesthetically.
No, yeah, because you think it's a rhythm game, so of course the sound is going to be cool, but the graphics are gorgeous, like the cell shading and the fluidity of the animation, like it's a beautiful game.
So yeah, go play Hi-Fi Rush if you haven't, or at least try it, because it is definitely a unique experience. There have not been any other games like it.
I have picked it up, but I have not tried it yet, but I'm very much looking forward to it.
Is this the game that came out that was like compared to Jet X Radio?
Probably not the one you're thinking of, which is Bomb Rush Cyberfunk.
Okay.
Another game with a great soundtrack and a cel-shaded look, but not exactly a rhythm game.
Got it.
Dredge.
This one was an honorable mention from me, and probably in a lesser year would have been one of my top picks. But 2023 had an abundance of riches.
Mhm.
Dredge. So yeah, 2023 had an abundance of riches in fishing games, I guess.
Yep.
And I mean, me being me, adore a game where I can putter around on the ocean, solving mysteries, exploring, fishing, and encountering cosmic horror fish. It was delightful. The art style is really unique, and I really enjoyed it. Just the ambiance of the game, I thought was really good, and just incredibly enjoyable. Puttering around and fishing up weird fish, solving mysteries.
And slightly overlapping, Dave the Diver.
This was one of my actual picks for this year.
It's so
Another
good.
Another
Yeah.
game that I spent a large number of hours playing in 2023. Dave the Diver has arguably too much going on.
I was going to say, there's so much game there.
There's a lot.
Yeah, it could reasonably be like 4 or 5 different games.
Like I picked it back up after we were talking about it, the Dredge crossover a couple of weeks back, and pushed on through past where I had stopped previously, and I'm in chapter 6 now, and new mini games are still showing up
Yes.
in
Yep.
chapter 6.
Yep.
Yep.
Good lord.
That's nonsense.
I think my joke about this was it felt like somebody decided to make a cohesive experience out of like a Korean gacha game that had gotten completely out of control.
Yeah.
Like they just have so many mechanics now by the end of it. And they
now-
introduced them slowly enough that it works.
Now here's a cooking mini game. Chop the vegetables.
Yeah,
What?
it's just mini games all the way down, and that's okay because it's charming as hell. And I mean, again, me being me, I really also just appreciate that, with some exceptions, all the fish are actual fish.
Yeah, I assume the jellyfish with a wizard hat doesn't actually exist.
Yeah, like I said,
But-
some
but mostly.
exceptions.
Mostly they're real fish, yeah. Because some fish are just weird.
Yep.
Pelican eels are real and terrifying.
Mm-hmm.
Narwhals are jerks.
Look, they couldn't use birds as jerks because it's mostly underwater.
Yeah.
But there's so much there, and yeah, I've been playing it for ages at this point, and I am not even close to unlocking all the recipes. I'm a few in-game weeks away from like getting all of the fishmon, and that's fine. Like it's another one of those games that's just enjoyable for me to putter around and collect/murder a lot of fish and turn them into sushi.
Because they are delicious.
I think the thing that I really enjoyed the most about it is just how, I don't know, like it's a very mechanically enjoyable game, in addition to having all these different layers and being super cute, but like just going into the ocean to go find fish, and also making sushi, and also like all these things are mechanically interesting.
The loop is really fun, and not one part of it feels like you're overstayed in it for too long or whatever.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Yeah, they keep introducing new things for you to do. I had a blast with this.
It was a lot of fun, and it was nice. It was a nice cozy game that you can come take a break from and come back to.
Yeah, I did take a long break from it and came back with 0 downtime, like getting back up to speed. It is, yeah, cozy is a nice adjective for it.
Armored Core 6.
I loved this game. Sort of put on my gray beard and comment that I've been into From Software for a lot longer than most of y'all newcomers. Because before they did Dark Souls, they were the other notable mech game.
Mm-hmm.
Because you have Mech Warrior and you've got Armored Core. And they were doing completely different things, and both of them desperately hoping that Gundam never made a good video game. And Gundam has
For a
since
long
made
time,
good.
they didn't.
I mean, Gundam has since made a good video game or two or three.
They made a lot.
But they've never had they've never pulled off the sort of unified, serious, lore heavy kind of thing that either Armored Core or Mech Warrior was doing. And we haven't seen an Armored Core game in ages. Like the last one was 2012, something like that.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
That's the same year Dark Souls came out.
And Kodra was talking before about in Celeste, when you get used, it's a bit of a hurdle to get used to the way you move and all of the various things, because it is a much more 3D game than most. It's got a ton of verticality. You have a lot of ability to influence that verticality. It has the notable flaw of having a Dark Souls tutorial when it doesn't need it, without the safety valve of just letting you keep going if you lose. But by the end of it, I played New Game Plus, New Game Plus, and the true ending. So I think it was 4 total playthroughs. And it continually showed me new interesting things, like challenged after sort of the first 3 chapters of the first playthrough, the difficulty curve evens out a lot. And so it's this kind of gentle, nice slope up where you're continually learning new things. And because so much of the story is in the New Game Plus and beyond, you get to go back to the previous fights that gave you problems and just trash them. And it's incredibly satisfying. It doesn't bump up the difficulty. It doesn't give them new abilities. It will give you alternate versions of missions, some of which are much harder, because it's like, oh, you did this mission with a super powerful ally. In this version, you're going to betray that ally and have to fight them while also completing the mission. And that's really hard. That gets hard quick. But also, you go back and you're like, oh, that stupid helicopter. You are nothing to me. Big flame wheel guy, get absolutely destroyed. I know exactly how to fight you now. And it's really satisfying. And by the end, it's one of the few games where I could just hit a zone and just, flow with the movement and the combat, and also it's like sweet big robots.
Yeah, I need to give it another try. I got past the helicopter and then was like trying to figure out what to do, and I probably need to give it another chance. But what I did see was fun.
Yeah, this is one of those games that I wanted to pick up but never got around to picking it up, because I was a big fan of the PS2 Armored Core games. Enjoyed them quite a bit. Also liked the massive amounts of customization you could do of the mechs in those games. So at some point, I will pick this up and play it, because it definitely looks like it would be interesting. So this next game I threw on the list as an honorable mention, mostly because I have been very harsh on New World over the period of its release for some of the decisions that team has made. But 2023 was kind of the year that they got their shit together. It was also the year that they released their first expansion to the game with a new area. They added mounts. They added there's a bunch of systems and from combat systems to crafting systems that got reworked significantly and made way more player friendly. And this is something that I think they had started during the tail end of 2022, but like it really came to fruition during 2023. And if you had played New World way back when and were more or less turned off by it, I highly suggest you install it and give it a play, because almost all the things that I wrote about in my key complaints column have now been fixed and work beautifully. So leveling trade skills, for example, is not just making a level 1 item, but make like 50,000 of them. Like it is actually reasonable to level trade skills now. So yeah, I mean, and they've also added a bunch of interesting areas to the game and have hit a point where they're on a release cadence where, pretty reliably every couple months something big comes out, and they seem to have stabilized on a pretty regular group of players. And I don't play it as much as I would maybe like to, but it is definitely in a good spot.
I'm glad to hear that they've continued to update and support it.
Right. I was afraid it would get shifted by the wayside and quietly canceled, but it seems like there's the fortitude to stick it out and do the right things. And I have been impressed with that team, and like they've gotten significantly better at every aspect of the game, from like, talking to the public to actually making good on, roadmaps, and it's been impressive to watch. So it is definitely more of a success story now than it was. So yeah, it's pretty cool. Fire Emblem Engage.
This was one of my honorable mentions. It's a little more of a traditional Fire Emblem game compared to Three Houses, but it was also rumored to be like the Fire Emblem anniversary game, even though it came out a few years later. Yeah, so it's like the reason
it still was that.
Yeah. I think it came out like 2 years after the anniversary or something like that. I forget. So they were a little late. But the main hook is that they add on to this is you have the emblem ring system, which are magical rings of protagonists from former Fire Emblem games, which you can equip to any of the very colorful cast of this game. Some very unique designs by Mika Picasso, so they're very bright. But anyways, the cast is fun. The ring system is neat because you can equip them to various characters, and like if you use like the Sigurd ring, you can basically turn any unit into a cavalier, so they have extended movement range, and they can team up and do a big spear attack on multiple enemies in a row. That was, I thought that was really interesting. I had a lot of fun experimenting with different units and different rings. The story is pretty anime, but it was fine. It was fun. I mean, this is probably a game you're going to want to play more for like the gameplay, because it has some really fun maps that I enjoyed. They were a blast to play. There were a couple that, made me sweat a little bit because there was like some tricky stuff going on.
Sounds like they took Fire Emblem Heroes and expanded it out to like a full release.
Yeah, kind of. And that's kind of funny you say that, because the DLC characters are some protagonists or characters from games that they didn't quite add in the main story. Like you can have Chrom and Tiki, and then Veronica from Fire Emblem Heroes, and her rings gimmick is basically to summon random units to battle. So yeah, the DLC stuff is fun. One of the rings is like the Three Houses leaders, and Tiki. One of them, okay, so Three Houses Leaders, like they give you extra XP, so you can basically use the DLC rings to kind of speed up your progression in the story, which is nice, but they're not necessary. You can obviously plow through and level up as needed with all the rings in the game. I had a lot of fun playing it. I actually don't think I finished the story DLC because it came out kind of late, and I think I was already playing something else by then. But I don't. It was just it was a really nice, satisfying Fire Emblem experience that was just very, very colorful. But yeah, the combat system was very satisfying. So if you want to have a good Fire Emblem combat experience, some good strategy fun, definitely just go for it.
Final Fantasy 16.
This was another one of my top 3 picks this year.
It was also runner-up for me.
Hey.
My white whale game this year.
I was very excited when this game was first announced. I've been waiting to see what Creative Business Unit 3 was going to do with it, and I thoroughly enjoyed it.
I agree, and I will also say this is the first of what I would call like the modern Final Fantasy releases with action combat, where the combat finally clicked for me. It
nice.
I don't know what it was about this game in particular, but it flowed really well. It helped that the primal battles were just incredibly epic.
Yes.
And the kaiju game of my dreams. Somebody please make a Godzilla and/or Pacific Rim version of the game with those style of fights.
That would be amazing.
Yes.
I think I mentioned when the demo came out, like they brought in a combat designer from Capcom, if I remember correctly. Somebody who worked on Devil May Cry previously.
Yes.
It shows.
Yes.
Like this one just feels better than the other Final Fantasy action games they've made so far.
Yeah. It definitely shows, and it's so fun to play. And I like that you get a good assortment of icons / primals to choose from for your combat loadouts. So if like you like one kind of style of combat a little more, you can kind of build around that icon. Like I am not super great at aerial combat, so Garuda was okay, but I found I liked using other ones like with some like crowd control a little better. I like doing Titan counters a lot. That was really super satisfying for me.
I liked the way that you could bounce between them on your loadout. I did like the aerial combat, so I enjoyed having Garuda and bouncing around and jumping on things.
I wasn't very good at it. So, but I mean, that's I think, credit to show that just how much flexibility can be in this combat system, because you can kind of play it how you want, and it's fine. And it feels really smooth to swap between your primal powers too, and they did a good job of messaging like your cooldowns, so you would always know what was ready. You could kind of have perfect timing for lining up your big attacks when you manage to stun enemies. I thought the combat was really, really just great.
Yeah, just so polished.
Yep. I went through and I did all the hunts. I just had so much fun playing this game. The first wave of the DLC was a really nice callback to some stuff from 14, which I thought was really cute. So I'm looking forward to their bigger DLC coming this year. Oh, and I had to mention that the soundtrack by Soken is amazing. He did a great job with epic fantasy sound, but he was also not afraid to get kind of weird and Soken-y when it was loud.
It was excellent.
They've been knocking it out of the park with Final Fantasy DLC basically ever since 15.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
It's really cool to see that they've kind of hit their stride there.
Well, hopefully
I'm looking forward to the
is
16 DLC. I think that's probably what I'm gonna pick it back up and play through it all.
Yeah.
And hopefully 16 is successful enough that they get to do all of their DLC.
Yeah, they're going to have an anniversary broadcast and say they're canceling everything. I don't think that's going to happen. I hope.
I'm really looking forward to it coming out on PC.
That's totally fair.
Like they've said numerous times that they are in fact working on the PC version. They just don't have a date for it. So I'm hoping at some point this year we'll get it.
Yep.
And it'll probably be good.
Just make sure you give Torgal many head pats.
Looking at you, FF7 PC.
Hey, look, the remake was fine.
The remake was fine.
Also, I may have purchased a Torgal.
Was really good.
I may have purchased a Torgal pen kind of recently.
Oh,
so
fantastic.
We'll see when that comes in.
Torgal is best boy.
I mean, it's going to show up at the exact same time as a Cerberus pin, so, you know.
All the good doggos.
Yes.
And that was the first half of our Games of the Year show. That felt kind of rapid fire.
A little bit.
We're getting better at this, question mark?
Maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I kind of feel like...
more practice. We have been doing it for a while.
Yeah, like, I'm looking at... Like, I moved one over to this week because I'm kind of looking at next week, and I have a feeling that there's several of those that we're going to talk about a little bit more.
There may be some discussions in that list, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, some things in there that were on multiple people's choices. One game in particular that's on, I think, nearly everybody's, if not everybody's.
Yeah.
I might actually get to play that game this week.
Yeah.
One of those we're also playing a heck of a lot of right now, so I have a feeling that we'll have a lot to talk about.
Such a good year for games.
A really good year for games.
Yes.
I say this many years, but it was this was a particularly good year for games.
Yeah.
Both for completely new games and for re-releases and remasters.
Well, and there's also like a lot of games that are really doing good out there that weren't a new release, but it's just a game that's continuing to get massive amounts of support.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that there's a really clear, once upon a time your re-releases of games were just like port it to the new console, slap a new sticker on it, and go.
Yeah. Like maybe add some new cutscenes if you're feeling really nice.
Yeah, and like actual real deal remasters and just like a better understanding, the whole it looks like you remember it really, really hits home. And it's cool to see that, being resurrected, because some of those games are great and they're just totally unplayable without the new version.
Yeah. I hadn't realized until I was looking to double check and make sure I was right about Dark Forces that Night Dive came into existence because System Shock was not available to play. Like that's why the studio was formed, to try and make System Shock exist again.
But like they've been releasing a lot of amazing things. Night Dive has done good work.
They really have.
Anyway, hopefully you enjoyed the show, and we will be back next week with the second half.
Hooray.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Stay warm, folks.
Good night.
See you.